Daisy Knox, we're terminating you effective immediately. She didn't even bother to look up when she said it. No handshake, no introduction, no explanation. Just a clean rehearsed sentence delivered from behind a brand new company-issued laptop she was still setting up. The login screen glowed faintly untouched, as if even the system itself hadn't accepted her authority yet. Her name is Vanessa Hale, newly appointed Chief Strategy Officer of Ardentis Group, the CEO's daughter-in-law. First day, first office, first decision. Fire me. Behind her stood a junior HR associate, stiff and pale, gripping his tablet like he was watching something go terribly wrong, but didn't have the clearance to stop it. The ink on her onboarding papers was probably still drying, and yet she had already decided to play executioner. She looked polished, composed. Her blonde hair tied back neatly, posture straight, voice steady. You could tell she had practiced this moment. Every word came out too perfect, too deliberate, like she was reading from an invisible script someone else had written for her. I didn't argue, didn't react, didn't give her the satisfaction. I simply stood, smoothed out my jacket, and looked at her and I really looked. Long enough for something in her expression to flicker just slightly. She thought this was power, thought this was leadership, thought this was her moment to take control. What she didn't understand was that she hadn't just made a decision. She had activated something. Quietly, I placed my badge on the desk between us and said almost casually, "You should let your father-in-law know." I paused, watching the room tighten around us. The board meeting in 3 hours might not go the way you expect. Then I turned and walked out without another word. If it touched you in any way, please consider liking and subscribing. With just one click, you're not only supporting the channel, you're also helping meaningful stories reach more people, becoming someone who spreads value and positive impact to the community. I'm also curious, where are you listening from, and what's the weather like there right now? The next part of this story includes some fictional details supported by AI to bring out deeper emotions and a stronger human message. I hope you'll find something in it that resonates with you. 3 hours. That's how long she had between her first bold decision and the moment everything began to unravel. Upstairs in the glass office that used to be mine, I imagined her settling in. Maybe she kicked off her heels, maybe she poured herself something. Celebratory, convinced she had just made the kind of decisive move executives brag about later. I could almost see her drafting a polished post in her head, something about strong leadership and difficult choices, the kind of words that sound impressive until reality catches up. Meanwhile, something far less visible was already in motion. Long before she ever walked into that office, long before her name appeared on any internal announcement, there were structures in place. Agreements, safeguards, clauses that weren't written for normal days, but for moments exactly like this one. Clause 9B, buried deep inside the original shareholder agreement. Not flashy, not discussed, not something anyone ever thought they would need. It covered a very specific scenario. If an executive without equity attempted to terminate a corporate officer without formal board approval, all interim authority granted to that executive would be immediately suspended. Control would revert to the majority shareholder pending an emergency review. And unlike most policies, this one didn't rely on interpretation. It activated the moment the action was taken. At 7:12 that morning, before I ever stepped into the building, I had already filed the activation request. Time-stamped, signed, legally binding, sent to every board member, investor, and legal representative connected to Ardentis Group. By the time she finished her first coffee, the system had already begun flagging her credentials. Unauthorized executive action. Pending review. Access restrictions queued. She thought she had removed me. What she didn't understand was that I was never just part of the company. I was written into it. And now, piece by piece, the structure I had built was beginning to respond exactly as it was designed to. While she was busy stepping into a role she didn't fully understand, I had already stepped into the one I'd spent years building. I never cared much for titles. Titles were visible, temporary, easy to hand out, and even easier to take away. What mattered was ownership, control. The kind that didn't sit on a nameplate but lived quietly inside contract signatures and percentages most people never bothered to read. Our dentist group didn't start as the polished empire it pretends to be now. In the early days, it was chaos dressed up as ambition. A founder with vision, but no structure. Deals made on instinct. Money moving faster than anyone could properly track. That's where I came in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand recognition. I built systems. I cleaned the mess no one else wanted to admit existed. Compliance frameworks, investor protections, operational safeguards. And every time I fixed something that could have cost the company millions, I asked for one thing in return. Equity, not bonuses, not promotions, shares. A fraction here, a percentage there. Small enough to ignore in the moment, significant enough to matter over time. By the third year, I held 15%. By the seventh, it had grown past 30. People left. People made mistakes. Some needed quick exits, others made quiet deals. I was always there offering solutions when things got complicated and taking equity when they couldn't afford anything else. No one paid attention. They were too busy celebrating titles, promotions, and public recognition. I was building something else entirely. Control. And by the time our dentist became stable, profitable, and attractive to investors, I had already secured 51% of it. Quietly filed, legally documented, untouchable. That ownership came with more than influence. It came with protection mechanisms, safeguards designed for moments when power fell into the wrong hands. Like today. Clause 9b wasn't an accident. It was written after watching someone almost tear the company apart years ago with a single reckless decision. I made sure that could never happen again. Which meant the moment Vanessa signed that termination, she didn't remove me. She handed control right back to me. And she didn't even realize it yet. By the time the courier envelopes started landing on executive desks, the shift had already begun. They didn't arrive all at once. One here, one there. Hand-delivered, signed for marked confidential. Thick packets sealed with the kind of quiet urgency that doesn't need to announce itself. Assistants carried them in without asking questions, placing them beside laptops and coffee cups like routine paperwork. It wasn't routine. Inside each envelope was everything. The activation notice. Clause 9b, highlighted and referenced. A full equity breakdown with my name attached to 51% of the company. Transaction records, legal confirmations, notarized filings. Every piece of documentation that had been ignored for years, now impossible to overlook. No one reacted immediately. That was the unsettling part. Because understanding came slowly. A board member opens the file halfway through a meeting, skims a few lines, then stops. Another reads the clause twice, then a third time, as if expecting the meaning to change. Someone calls legal. Someone else cancels their afternoon schedule without explanation. The realization spreads quietly but completely. This wasn't internal politics anymore. This was governance, liability, exposure. And at the center of it was one simple fact none of them could dismiss. Majority shareholder Daisy Knox. 51%. That number carried weight. It meant voting control. It meant authority that didn't depend on titles or approvals. It meant that whatever had just been triggered wasn't optional. It was binding. Meanwhile, across the building, Vanessa was still operating as if nothing had changed. She moved through the halls with the same confident stride, giving instructions, asking for reports, trying to settle into a role that had already begun slipping out from under her. Systems hadn't fully responded yet. But they would. Because once Clause 9b was activated, there was no reversing it with a quick conversation or a corrected email. The process had already started, and it was moving faster than she could see. What she thought was a clean beginning was already turning into something she wouldn't be able to control. And somewhere between those unopened envelopes and her next decision, the company had already stopped recognizing her authority. The call reached him on the third attempt. Richard Hale wasn't in the office when everything started to collapse. He was halfway through a private golf round, the kind that required reservations months in advance, and came with more ego than competition. The first call from legal he ignored. The second he declined without looking. The third came from his personal counsel. He answered. "What is it?" he snapped, already irritated. The voice on the other end didn't waste time. You need to come back. Now. A pause. Why? Another pause. Shorter this time. He could hear it in the silence before the answer came. Because something's been triggered, and it involves your daughter-in-law. That was enough. He didn't finish the round, didn't say goodbye, didn't even change out of his shoes. Within 20 minutes, he was back at our dentist group, moving faster than anyone had seen him move in years. The moment he walked in, he knew. No one greeted him, no one smiled. Legal was already waiting, so was the CFO. A few board members had arrived early, standing in small tense clusters that went silent the second he entered the room. "What's going on?" he demanded. The general counsel stepped forward, holding a folder that looked heavier than it should have. "Sir, a termination was executed this morning." He frowned. "So it was unauthorized." That word landed differently. By who, no one answered immediately. The silence stretched just long enough to make the truth unavoidable. Finally, the lawyer said it. "Vanessa." Richard blinked as if the name didn't register the first time. "She doesn't have that authority," he said more to himself than anyone else. "No," the lawyer replied evenly. "She doesn't." Another pause. "And because of that, he continued opening the folder. Clause 9B has been activated." Richard didn't speak, didn't move. He just stood there staring at the documents in front of him as the weight of something far bigger than a simple mistake began to settle in. This wasn't damage control. This was consequence. If you agree with how I stayed calm and let the system handle everything, drop a 1 in the comments. I'm curious to see how many of you would have handled it the same way. Up on the executive floor, she was still acting like nothing had changed. Vanessa walked back into the office that used to be mine, set her bag down, and opened her laptop again. The unfinished message was still there, blinking on the screen. Something about leadership, about making tough calls, about stepping into a new era. She read it once, then added another line, trying to make it sound stronger, more decisive. She didn't notice the silence. No new emails. No responses from legal. No congratulations from the board. That kind of silence doesn't feel like approval. It feels like something has gone wrong, but you don't know where yet. She shifted in her chair and tried to pull up the internal dashboard. The page loaded halfway, then stalled. She refreshed. Nothing. Tried again. This time, an error message appeared. Access restricted. She frowned, thinking it was a glitch. Moved on to something else. Expense approvals. Denied. Scheduling system. Blocked. Investor portal. Unavailable. Now she noticed. The systems weren't failing. They were rejecting her. Down the hall, IT had already seen the flags. Her credentials had been marked for review, her authority placed under suspension pending board confirmation. No one had touched anything manually. It was all happening automatically, exactly as the clause dictated. She picked up her phone, scrolling quickly, looking for something that still worked, something that still confirmed she was in control. Then it buzzed. An unknown number, one message. What's happening? I thought she didn't have that kind of power. Vanessa stared at it, reading it twice, then checking the sender. A lead investor. Her grip tightened slightly, because the message wasn't about her. It was about me. And for the first time since that morning, something in her expression shifted. Not confusion, not anger, something closer to doubt. She looked back at her screen, at the half-written message about leadership and control, and slowly stopped typing. The cursor kept blinking, but she didn't move. Because somewhere deep down, she was starting to realize something she hadn't considered before. She hadn't removed a problem. She had exposed one. The boardroom was already full by the time she arrived. Not the usual kind of full, with quiet chatter and polite greetings. This was different. Conversations stopped the moment the door opened. Papers were stacked neatly untouched. Glasses of water sat in front of each seat, condensation forming slowly in the still air. Vanessa walked in with the same confidence she had carried all morning, portfolio in hand. Posture, straight expression, controlled. She glanced toward the head of the table, already moving toward it as if it belonged to her. No one stopped her at first. Not until she reached the chair. "You can sit there!" the board chair said calmly, gesturing to a seat along the side. That one isn't yours. She froze for a second, just long enough for the shift to register. Excuse me, she asked. The general counsel spoke next, voice steady, almost detached. Your appointment is under suspension pending shareholder review. Effective immediately. The words didn't land all at once. She looked around, expecting someone to correct it. No one did. That doesn't make sense, she said, forcing a small laugh. I was appointed this morning. Yes, the lawyer replied. And you executed an unauthorized termination shortly after. Silence pressed in from all sides. Under Clause 9b, that action voids your interim authority, he continued. You currently hold no voting power, no executive control. Her grip tightened around her portfolio. That's not possible. But it was. She turned toward Richard, searching for support. He didn't look at her. Didn't say a word. The room didn't need to explain anything further. Because the reality was already clear. She wasn't leading this meeting. She wasn't even part of it anymore. She was just there to watch what came next. At exactly 3 o'clock, the door opened. No announcement, no hesitation. I walked in like I had never left. Same black suit, same measured pace. No rush, no performance. The kind of presence that doesn't ask for attention because it already owns it. Conversations didn't stop this time. There weren't any to begin with. Every eye in the room shifted anyway. Not because I demanded it, because they understood what it meant. I didn't acknowledge anyone. Didn't look toward the side seats. Didn't look at Vanessa. I walked straight to the head of the table, set my folder down, and opened it without sitting. As majority shareholder, I said calmly, I'm calling for an immediate vote to suspend all executive appointments made within the last 48 hours pending review. No emotion, no emphasis, just fact. The words settled heavily across the room. The board chair nodded slowly, already reaching for his pen. Motion received, he said. Logged for immediate consideration. Still no one challenged it. No one questioned it. Because they couldn't. Across the table, Vanessa sat, frozen, her earlier confidence gone replaced by something far quieter. Her hands rested on the table, now still but tense, like she didn't know where to put them anymore. Richard finally lifted his head. You planned this, he said, his voice lower than before. I met his eyes for the first time. I protected what you built, I replied. There was nothing else to add. No argument, no defense, just the truth sitting between us. The lawyer confirmed the activation the chair called for review, and the room shifted fully into procedure. No theatrics, no raised voices. Just quiet, controlled authority, moving exactly as it was designed to. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about reclaiming a position. It was about reminding everyone in that room that I had never lost it. The room emptied slowly after the vote was called into private session. No one rushed. No one spoke loudly. Chairs moved back, with quiet restraint papers, gathered carefully, as if any sudden movement might disturb something still settling in the air. One by one they stepped out, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than anything said during the meeting. I remained where I was, standing, still. Richard lingered longer than the others. He pretended to review documents, flipping through pages he hadn't really read, buying himself a few extra seconds before facing what he already knew. Can we talk? He finally asked. I nodded once and walked toward the adjoining room without waiting. He followed. Inside, the door closed softly behind us. No audience, no board, no need for performance, just reality. He sat down first. I didn't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was earned. I didn't think. He started, then stopped. I know, I said. That was the problem. I opened my folder and placed 2 documents in front of him, side by side. Clean, simple, final. Option 1, I said. You buy out my shares. 51%. 10 times current valuation. Full transfer. No conditions after. He stared at the number without reacting. Option 2, I continued. I stay. Majority control. Executive restructuring. Full audit of leadership operations and appointments. Everything resets. He leaned back slightly, running a hand across his face. That's not a choice, he said quietly. It is, I replied. Just not an easy one. His eyes moved between the 2 pages again, slower this time. I need time. I shook my head. You had time. That landed. Because this wasn't sudden. This was the result of everything that had been ignored, everything that had been assumed, and everything that had finally caught up. I closed the folder, leaving the papers in front of him. You have 24 hours, I said. Then I turned toward the door, leaving him alone with a decision he couldn't delay anymore. The building felt different the next morning. Not louder, not quieter. Just stripped. Like something artificial had been removed overnight, leaving only what actually mattered behind. There was no company-wide announcement, no polished email from communications, no attempt to control the narrative, just a single calendar invite sent to every executive-level inbox. Emergency transition briefing. Attendance required. Richard didn't show. At 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the meeting, his resignation email went out. Short, controlled, carefully worded. Personal reasons. Confidence in the future. Gratitude for the journey. No one replied. At 8:57, Vanessa arrived. No heels this time. No sharp confidence. Just quiet steps, a neutral blazer, and a face that looked like she hadn't slept. She approached the access gate, held up her badge, and waited for the familiar sound. It didn't come. She tried again. Nothing. The security guard stepped forward gently, already aware of the update. I'm sorry, he said. Your access has been revoked. She didn't argue, didn't ask questions. She just stood there for a second, processing, then nodded and handed over her badge. Her phone followed, the office keys after that. Everything she thought she had gained returned just as quickly. Upstairs, the new executive group was already seated. No empty titles. No inherited authority. Just people chosen for what they could actually do. Legal, finance, compliance, governance. Each one there for a reason. I walked in last. This time, I took the seat at the head of the table. No hesitation, no announcement. We didn't talk about what happened. We moved forward. Audit schedules, structural changes, leadership realignment. Every decision grounded in something real, something measurable, something earned. No applause, no celebration, just clarity. When the meeting ended, I stood, gathered my folder, and stepped out into the same hallway I had walked through the day before. Only now, no one looked away. They made space, not because I demanded it, because they finally understood. Power was never in the title. It was in the structure behind it. I didn't win because I fought louder. I won because I understood what truly holds things together. Titles can be given overnight, but real power is built quietly over time, through choices most people overlook. What stayed with me wasn't the moment I walked back into that room, but the realization that patience, clarity, and integrity will always outlast arrogance. If you were in my place, would you react in the moment? Or prepare long before it ever happens? If this story made you pause even for a second, then it's already doing something meaningful. A simple like or subscription from you can help this message reach someone else who might need it today. Your comment, your share it, could be the reason someone chooses to think differently, to act more wisely. And sometimes that's more powerful than you think.